Welcome to our August monthly Kube Chat, Lock It Down, Security Practices for Modern Kubernetes Clusters. Before we dive in, I just wanted to give you a quick overview of what we'll be covering today. So we'll start by framing why Kubernetes security matters now more than ever, especially as adoption continues to grow and environments become more complex. From there, we'll walk through a set of foundational best practices, things like RBAC, pod security, and network segmentation. Then we're going to shift gears into securing secrets and APIs, and we'll cover some strategies there for managing sensitive data and minimizing your exposure. After that, we'll explore some advanced threat detection techniques, including image scanning, runtime protection, and observability. And then we'll wrap up with a section on hardening your clusters and aligning with different frameworks like CIS benchmarks. At the end, we'll share just a few key takeaways and resources and leave some time for some live Q&A. So feel free to drop any questions you have in your chat as we go, and we'll cover as many of those as we can. I also wanted to flag to everyone that we'll be recording today's session, and we will send an email to you probably sometime early next week. So our first speaker today is Joe. He's our Principal Product Marketing Manager here at IBM Kubecost. He has a wide range of experience across industries like cybersecurity, cloud, fintech, and edtech. He's passionate about making complex Kubernetes and FinOps topics more accessible and helping teams get real value from their tools. You can connect with Joe on LinkedIn. I did include a link to his LinkedIn there on your console, so feel free to connect with him. And then our second speaker today is Cliff, and he is our Director of Engineering here at IBM Kubecost. He leads high-impact engineering teams working through the intersection of Kubernetes, FinOps, and AI. He's scaled platforms by orders of magnitude, strengthened security postures, and reduced product defects, all while building a culture of just conscious leadership and continuous improvement. Cliff is a big believer in building systems that help people thrive, and we're very excited to have him here today. Be sure to connect with Cliff on LinkedIn as well. I also included a link to his LinkedIn. And with that, I will pass it over to Joe.
Thanks, Dee. Many of you may know quite a bit about Kubecost. Some of you may not know anything or just have heard about Kubecost before. IBM Kubecost is a DevOps-centric tool that provides real-time cost visibility and cost optimization insights for teams working with Kubernetes. The solution helps you continuously be aware of, allocate, manage, budget, and ultimately reduce your cloud costs as they relate to Kubernetes. Kubecost runs on any Kubernetes environment, all of the big cloud environments that you are aware of, small ones that you maybe never have heard of, and on-premise. Anywhere you've got Kubernetes workloads running, you can instrument Kubecost. We're managing more than $5 billion in Kubernetes spend across our customer base, and we have teams across the world that can help you to become more cost aware, more cost efficient in your use of Kubernetes. We have a lot of amazing customers such as GitLab, EA Sports, Capital One, Audi, Johnson & Johnson, and others that have reaped the benefits, saved lots and lots of money, and opened the black box that historically has been Kubernetes costs. Go ahead to the next one here. Oops. All right. Look, the reality is that Kubernetes is booming, right? It's become a core part of how modern infrastructure works. It's become a core part of how teams build applications. It's used everywhere, from startups to global banks. If you work at a company that builds refrigerators or barbecue grills or cars, you've been probably trying to explain while pulling your hair out what Kubernetes and clusters are to your colleagues for the last few years. But with that ubiquity, with that use across every industry, across all sorts of companies, comes a really sharp rise in attacks. Kubernetes is a delightful target for threat actors for lots of reasons. A recent study from SentinelOne in 2025 found that nearly 9 out of 10 organizations had experienced at least one Kubernetes security incident in the last year. I always wonder about that 10th, right? Maybe they don't have Kubernetes in production. Maybe they say they're using Kubernetes, but they're really not. Who knows? But like everything that you connect to the internet these days, whether it's your Wi-Fi enabled blender, your PS5, a web server, right? It takes about 15 or 20 minutes before you start seeing things automatically looking, scanning for vulnerabilities, and trying to, get into that cluster. It's usually not some zoot, novel group of threat actors that are going after your stuff. It's usually not, a targeted phishing attack that results in somebody owning your clusters. It's usually something as benign as a simple misconfiguration, a default being left in its default settings that should have been changed. It's not always just about software flaws. It's not always about vulnerabilities found deep in code. It's often about these defaults of access control, of configuration, of things like secrets that allow those resources to become exposed and a part of your attack surface that ultimately is going to get leveraged. So Kubernetes security needs to be a design goal. It needs to be something that you think about before you even start building your architecture, much less your design or the code that's ultimately going to run as your app. It needs to not be something bolted on or an afterthought. This needs to take place early and continuously throughout your process. Go to the next. So there's, I think a lot of things can get blamed on Kubernetes, right? And you can start to make it kind of malicious. It's not malicious, but it certainly allows threat actors to be malicious. It allows people working with Kubernetes to be maybe negligently malicious, right? There's a lot of opportunities to get security wrong when working with something as complex, as dynamic, as scalable as Kubernetes. So it's really powerful, but along with that power comes a lot of nooks and crannies and differences from more traditional means of securing your infrastructure, your application code. The truth is, it really doesn't stop you from making bad decisions or taking bad actions. And so there's a lot of onus on teams that are working with Kubernetes to get those things right so that they don't become victims of a significant security breach. In this slide, we'll talk about some of the most common security missteps that we see across clusters that are out there in the wild and how you can use policy as code to prevent them, prevent things with vulnerabilities or misconfigurations from getting deployed and becoming a vector for attack. Some of the common missteps we see is granting cluster admin privileges to everything and all things. It should never, a default service account should never have admin control. There's a lot of people and access points that don't need to have that control. Approach this with like a least privilege mindset, right? Give the things and the people that absolutely need it that access, and then make them adhere to good security practices like changing their passwords regularly. We see a lot of teams that expose their Kubernetes APIs or their webhooks to the internet. That is putting all of your laundry out there in the air in a way that people can take advantage of it. Don't do that. We see people just skip over the whole step of network segmentation, and maybe the most foundational aspect of good security practices. Allowing flat pod-to-pod communication is a no-no. Like, just don't allow that to happen. Segment your network in meaningful ways that make it increasingly difficult for bad guys to get to the good stuff. We also see teams allowing privileged containers or host access, right? Again, those can become a chained vector of attack that can be easily prevented. We also see a lot of people missing Patch Tuesday, right? Like there's a lot of third-party add-ons, a lot of dependencies. This is like the Russian nesting doll thing where it might not be anything in your code. It might not be anything that you use, but something tangential that can ultimately become a foothold or a toehold for bad guys to get in and take control of your clusters. A recent example of that might be, cough, ingress nightmare. So implement guardrails that scale. Use policy as code. It's a fantastic and very effective way of keeping things like this from getting you owned. Enforce security rules automatically. Lean on automation to do things where humans otherwise might miss it, or inject misconfiguration, mistakes. We're human, it happens. Use automation for consistency, for accuracy, but make sure that you're also implementing that in secure ways. Don't allow risky configurations, things like root containers or unapproved images to be resources within your environment. Catch drift and fix those the sources of that drift before they are allowed to pass through your CI/CD pipelines, right? If you are using GitOps or subscribe to GitOps principles, right? You can use the drift capabilities within GitOps to identify when you have something that's no longer what you've declared, and you get an audit trail where you can go back, figure out what changed, who changed it, and plug those holes, right? Use open source tools, whether it's a relatively polished tool like Caverno, or you're rolling your own policies with OPA. Use some kind of a tool that allows you to apply policy as code in automated fashion through your CI/CD pipeline. And then version control policies, so you can be transparent, so that you're auditable, so that you're meeting compliance requirements, so that you are adhering to best practices around security and accountability. Cliff, turn it over this one to you to start. Mute.
Cliff, you're on mute.
While he gets that mute off, I'll go ahead and jump in. So the world became aware of Ingress Nightmare, March of this year. I think it was the 24th. That's a Monday. So those people that were adhering to Patch Tuesday probably woke up with some work to do. It was a busy week for everybody. Essentially, Ingress Nightmare is a set of critical flaws in Nginx Ingress controller. It allowed a chained attack to occur, and for people to be able to extract secrets from across namespaces, to be able to take full control of clusters, being able to get to RCE relatively simply across about half of the cloud-hosted Kubernetes clusters in the world, right? This was bad. It was headline-making stuff. And it used to be that these kinds of headlines happened every 2 years. It seems like these are happening every 2 months. But it allowed full cluster takeover. It really kind of highlights the risk of public webhooks, unpatched components, not adhering to the foundational security basics. And I assume, we had to be aware of this. We had to probably do some work that week as well. Cliff, you want to talk about maybe impact and lessons learned and how we do?
Yeah, thanks, Joe, and sorry for not unmuting fast enough there. It's kind of crazy when you think about something as powerful as Nginx, right? The simplicity of it, the beauty of it. I think it is the Swiss Army knife of our tech stack today. It can do so many things for us, but it's also the front door to pretty much everything. Like you said, the entire internet is probably running behind an Nginx proxy or an Ingress controller that is using this under the hood. And I don't know the exact root causes in all of this, but when you wake up on that day, you start to really rapidly understand, Joe, when you talked in that previous slide about things like policy as code and just all the pieces that you might not be doing well enough when this problem in a critical moment becomes difficult. And I think that's the whole premise, baby. If you take the sum total of everything we're saying here today, is to try to shift as much of that problem solving up front, so that you're not trying to do it when the world is literally on fire. And I think for us, it came down to a few really kind of difficult problems to solve. That we just had several of our workloads, several of our clusters that didn't have the kind of maybe care and feeding on labels. So we didn't understand exactly what everything was. running that way, right? And maybe a few key examples, but when you're trying to risk mitigate and you're trying to understand how you're going to deploy it, what the steps need to be in which order, like those things really matter. And so that ability to observe that because it was already there, and that goes right back to that policy as code, right? Being able to kind of enforce those good habits, because it probably would have taken us 2 seconds to add some labels to all of those workloads that were there first, and then I just think that the ability to just know exactly where everything is, right, and see exactly all of your infrastructure and kind of that holistic picture, to be able to understand when you're again making a checklist here of making sure you got them all. It's really really difficult, and so that's where that observability, like even your Kubecost, who's not written to be your security assistant, is really useful there, because we give you that container level view at label levels, and so then you could sit there and say, I want to look at every node that's running this. I want to look at every ingress controller that's attached to one of these things by label. Where's it at? How do I go access it? Get the right teams on it, and so forth. And so, like I said, that was the biggest impact to us, was just coordinating who had access to which clusters were the affected ones in, and then just try to strategically go attack each one of them to combat this and mitigate the risk. And it was an abrupt morning, and I know I think Jesse's done a few of these webinars, so hopefully some of you guys know him. He is so magic at some of these things. He not only did he help us get out of that situation really quickly, lots of quick scripting, and you just get your hopper hat on and go the opposite direction here, right? And then he's really done a great job of helping us build the strategy to kind of move forward and put some of these other pieces in place that maybe we just didn't think about before. And I mean, that's at the end of the day, that's what we're doing, right? We forget, or we just don't think about that one thing because we're moving fast, which security is probably not the reason we show up every day, right? It's probably just a byproduct of what needs to happen to take care of our customers, take care of our customer data, things like that. And so we get caught up in the moving quick sometimes, and little things get missed. And policy, I think, Joe, is the number one takeaway I learned from this was an ounce of prevention saves a pound of pain, as they say. So.
Absolutely. It should have been a wake-up call for everybody. If you got hit by this, it maybe in a more acute wake-up call. If you didn't, it should have you looking at your everything from labeling policies and requirements, right, through to how frequently you patch and how readily you can respond to incidents like this, because the next one is probably a month and a half around the corner or so. Look, I think that that's a great security pitch too, right? Who would have thought that that good label hygiene would have such an impact on security, right? Like our parents had told us to eat our veggies growing up. We've been telling everybody, get your labeling hygiene and tagging hygiene together. Here's why, guys, right? This is a really visceral example of it. Okay, we can move on. So we've talked about foundational security practices so far, right? The things that are kind of like the bottom layer of bricks. We've looked at why Kubernetes security is so critical and how quickly things can go wrong, quite literally in a matter of a few hours while you're getting some sleep. So let's shift to what we consider these foundational best practices. These are the core building blocks of any secure cluster. It comes down to access control. It comes down to pod level security. It comes down to network segmentation and a few other things. It's really easy to get that sparkle in your eye for the coolest new AI-powered tool, to go after this novel, new, innovative, groundbreaking, but very niche-y kind of security control that maybe, if I stand on one leg and the moon is blue, it might affect me, my team, my organization. But look, it's not advanced detection that's going to get you out of these kinds of incidents, like Ingress Nightmare. It's going to be the basics not being locked down that are ultimately going to result in a breach. So we're going to walk through each one of these pillars. We're going to give you some pretty specific examples of what good looks like, and we're going to help you avoid some of the common traps that we see in the wild when people don't get these foundational security steps right for their Kubernetes environments.
So I think the idea here is restrict, assign, and audit. And so uh, the privilege sprawl that kind of just happens, and specifically when we look at our RBAC best practices, um, you know, I think it's easy, these first principles kind of things here. Like everybody can nod their head yes, and then it's also the most common thing as a guy who's been a part of a lot of teams who and I know, you know, D said I'm the director of Eng for Kubecost, but guys, I've been a coder for a lot longer, and they just happen to let me start doing some other stuff over here. But at the end of the day, we like to move fast. We like to create, and so these things are sometimes it's just an afterthought, or sometimes it's we are trying to uh, you know make it easier to go fast. But at the end of the day, the key that I think about when I think of least privilege access and this overall security stance is limiting blast radius. So when you grant the permissions as a minimum only, then you can at least start to limit the output that's going to happen when this thing gets chained together with the next thing. And you'll look, if you look at every critical major severe outbreak of these new attack vectors, or these incidents on big companies especially, that you see in the news, it's going to happen with that stacking of the chain together. And so using role and role binding namespace access, um, reserving your cluster role and cluster role bindings for cluster wide needs only, and then auditing those bindings regularly. I think this is a really difficult one because it's easy to kind of set this idea of how we're going to do things moving forward. Going back and kind of like sweeping up and making sure that anything that needed to be changed or no longer needs access to that. This is to me, the thing that I've got bitten by the most. This is like the number one thing on the list for me. And then the hard part here is those third-party tools. If you just go and blindly, install some container, some Helm chart that you're not necessarily looking at, you're not looking at everything that it's requesting, then you're just you're leaving the door open, right? And at the end of the day, mistakes are part of learning, but we're responsible for making sure that when we click the deploy button, that it's something we're owning, right? And so those common pitfalls, you mentioned this, Joe, cluster admin to a default service count. Man, it sure would make it easy to do a lot of things. I'm not going to get those errors because I don't know yet what thing I actually needed, but it sure does leave the door wide open if the service account if the service running under that account was compromised because of maybe a misconfiguration of the container or a pod configuration. We'll talk going down that stack here as we go. Those wildcard rules, I have been guilty of this so many times where it's just, again, I don't know exactly what we need yet, so let's just go grant star. That is the most difficult thing to fix going forward. And it probably, if we spent an hour kind of fleshing it out and maybe experimenting a little bit, we could just say, okay, I need exactly this thing, this verb, and so forth.
Instead
we're
of
using
putting
the
a
same
splat
cluster
there.
role.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're using the same cluster role. Any of these unrelated apps and teams. That is the other like really scary one in my mind that I've been bitten with a lot. Where going through the heartache sometimes of creating new cluster roles. That's not necessarily a privilege given to every single person, and so we just reuse the thing over and over and over. When you're under attack, that may be your biggest regret, right? And the last thing I want is regrets on that day, right? When I'm trying to do incident management. Overlooking sensitive resources like your secrets, your pod and nodes. The further down you get, the more dangerous these things get in your attack vector. So, it's easy to talk a lot about the top of that stack, the ingress controller, the cluster, those kind of things. But the further down somebody can get into the stack, the more dangerous it gets. skipping the access audits again, going back and looking at this, whether it's employees that have moved on or whether it's tools that have changed, like just leaving those things as either the defaults or as what it used to be, without kind of going back and just asking the question, why does it need it? Not because you're combative to it, but genuinely just wanting to know, why does this thing need it, and does it really? And if it does, that's great. Let's just document that really quick, and then we'll move on. But if it doesn't, then we could save ourselves again that regret on incident day, and it might be a huge thing, because if that privilege just happened to have, unbeknownst to you, because of one other mistake maybe another team made, then it may be the thing that opens the door for them to get access to that database or what have you. So
yeah. So a lot of these security controls don't have to slow teams down, right? So you can
that's
secure
right.
pods without taking the agility away or the velocity away.
And I think, Joe, I mean, that's the key, right? I think when we think about it slowing us down, it's because it's taking our directed attention away from the problem we're trying to solve at hand and putting it on the like surrounding guardrails in it. But when you're creating something brand new, going back to that responsibility model, right? Like when you're creating that brand new thing, taking that little bit of time to just say, what guardrails could I put in place today? And that's why everything you mentioned, Joe, at like the top of this stack here, those guardrails, it frees the team, right? Like it is, when you have these basic pieces, it really starts to get good. And I think pod security is a great example of that. When you start to balance that security and agility, drop the unnecessary capabilities. That's a pretty easy win right there, right? And when we look at like good, better, best here, I think that like the further left you get, these are kind of table stakes or first principles kind of stuff. Best may take a little more effort, but again, in the long term, it's freeing to your team. Whether you're the one that's ultimately responsible for that set, or you're just one of the team members, like taking stewardship of this is a huge win, and just iteratively getting better every day. So set the read only root file system to true, and the run is non-root to true. This was the cheapest change I've ever made. It did take me a few days to get through a couple of issues where we, as developers, had kind of sloppily done a couple of things that depended on maybe access to that container write system that we didn't need in that moment. But we cleaned that up, and after that, we knew we were shipping a better product at the end of it. And luckily, we found those kind of in our internal things. But sometimes these things get into production, right? And that's your moment of regret in incident day. Getting anything and everything off the host really is going to be the key here. So whether that's your host path, your host network, or any kind of privileged mode, if it's possible, remove it. There are definitely certain things, certain daemon sets sometimes that really need container root access or things like that. But if you can get it out of the host, that's way better. Again, I mentioned at the beginning, the top-down approach, the further down in that stack you get, the more dangerous things become. Use built-in pod security under the better side here, right? So pod security admission. I think that this was a little bit more involved than some of the other changes that we made, but again, I think it's been a huge shift in our ability to keep a tight ship here. The restricted baseline levels per namespace. Any of these kind of gates you can put at those higher levels, again, those are the guardrails that kind of create that freedom for the team. And then blocking or auditing pods that don't meet the standard. This one's the hardest, in my opinion, from in this best or this better column, because this is the one where maybe your teammate starts to feel like this is a combative action. And I think the partner with them, right? They're creating that partnership to say, how do we find a version of this thing that kind of meets the standards that we have? And just looking for these opportunities to iteratively get it better. If you absolutely can't, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, it seems like that, right? Like setting those up as standards to actually not admit, right, those kinds of pod changes or those pods. And then things like labeling namespaces, right?
Yeah.
At first, it might feel like that stuff slows your team down. and it probably does, but you build some good practices around that, and
100%.
the positive ripple effects of doing it are huge, and it no longer slows the team down, it becomes a part of their workflow, right? So
Yeah, and especially, I keep going back to, right, if you measure what you feel and see on incident day, because it will happen to your team. I can guarantee it. If Let me put it a different way. If you don't know that it is happening to your teams, then we're probably experiencing it and just don't know it, right? And that's the even scarier part. But that's where this starts to become an accelerator for us, especially on that day. Um, Best, again, these are a little more involved. Kyberno, OPA Gateway Keeper, you mentioned that. Great tools. Putting policy as code is a huge way to move the needle forward. Org-specific policies, no root, label requirements, image registries. Again, the guardrails that kind of set the path of freedom. Validating and mutating the audit pods before they're admitted. Auditing the pods before they're admitted. It can be a pretty quick process, whether it's async or sync. It could be a peer review process type thing. And I think that jumps right into the next one: version control and test the policies alongside manifests, right? Just build as much basically the automation, make it to where nobody has to think about this, and it becomes really, really fast. And again, if you take that partnering mentality, it's going to get better fast. So. Isolating, protecting, and repeating. We look at the problem here. Every pod in Kubernetes by default, right? Every pod can talk to every pod. It's a very flat network. When I mentioned above that, limiting that blast radius when we can, and I know I'll talk about it again. This is a huge piece to that, right? This is when every pod can talk to every pod. If your Nginx ingress controller has a vulnerability in it, and that can have unfettered access to your database, this could be a huge nightmare to you, right? Or what if even worse, what if you had some kind of secret or token with access to the thing that either controls your data or your bill or what have you, and that is stored inside of a container, maybe in an unsecure way, and they can see that from this pod because they could gain access. So again, the further down in the stack you start to get, the more dangerous it gets. Unrestricted lateral movement is kind of what happens here. Microservices equals more connections and more risk, like less visibility and understanding, right? Because the system got bigger and wider. And then most of your teams don't segment by default. So by the time you've pushed it into production, this is going to be an impossible thing to go clean up. And now it's a debt item, right, that you're accruing interest on. And so that gets really difficult. So the principles in this are put those network policies pod to pod and namespace level traffic. Think of them like firewalls for the workloads. It's a very, very simple thing to add. It may take a few days, like I said, to kind of hash out what you do and don't need in a specific pod or container. The policies can whitelist, so allow communication for ingress and egress, and then so that you kind of do that in a code way, in an automated way, and then combine those namespace boundaries for defense in depth. And some examples here: only allow API pods to talk to the database. Don't allow anything else in the namespace to, right? And only on specific traffic patterns like this. One directional, right? And if you need bidirectional, that's one thing, but direction matters too. Deny all egress traffic by default. The scariest moment I've ever seen was watching some logs come in live when there was an identity provider that had a vulnerability, and I was watching logs happen in one of our developer clusters, and they were trying to download their script. And luckily, there were two key things there. We didn't have curl, and they couldn't hit the internet. And so it was kind of funny where this was going. But I was very thankful again on that day when I saw it that they were limited in that way. Isolate sensitive namespaces. This is key, right? So if something is controlling sensitive data, like try to segment that off. And then with those namespace level networking and things like that, you can really start to, again, limit the blast radius. And then use those match labels. It's a pretty easy way to give trusted pods access to what they need. And then you start to build a system here that can be replicated and kind of continued out without being super knowledgeable in the mechanics of it all.
All right, so we've laid some foundations here, right? We've restricted access, we've assigned roles, we've got auditing tools, we know what's happening, we've secured our pods, our teams are still moving quick, we've isolated network segments, we've put up some firewalls in front of our workloads, and we've turned this into kind of a continuous repeating process where we're learning from our mistakes. We're doing this regularly, not just every time that there's a big CVE hitting the headlines. So we've got the basics down, right? So how do we move past that? Attackers aren't just looking to get into your cluster to, spray graffiti, right? They're looking, these are financially motivated, frequently groups of individuals that are highly skilled. They are either in it for a bag of goodies that they can sell, or they are in it to camp out in your Kubernetes environment until there is something worth stealing. So the next step really comes down to protecting your sensitive data, protecting your APIs. APIs are projected still by the end of this decade to be the #1 vector of attack for breaches. So we're going to walk through how to manage Kubernetes secrets safely, reduce your API attack surface, monitor what's actually happening at the control plane level so you are in control, not on your back heel here.
So those secrets that I talked about a second ago, and Joel, you mentioned on these APIs and these different pods, this is like the most critical piece of data I think that most of them have, because it's the keys to everything else. So one of the risks here is that these things by default are stored in etcd as base64 encoded. And so you can definitely get to the raw data underneath that. And then they're accessible to any pod with permission to mount them. Leaked secrets are immediate lateral movement or ancillary movement through your cloud account or what have you. So, we can go into that, go back to least privilege, RBAC and everything when you make a secret. That's the other thing, right? We're limiting blast radius. So enable encryption at rest in your in whatever form of secret storage you want to use. But in etcd, you can do this. Use RBAC to strictly limit who and what can read those secrets. And then, so don't just allow global access to all secrets, right? And then avoid hard coding those secrets in the images, any config maps or any source code. Make sure that it's stored in that encrypted form. And then even better, and I know Hashi has Vault, and there's AWS Secrets Manager, CSI Driver. These things are going to be an even better way to take, not only is it encrypted, but you've got a much more secure mechanism and limited time access to those things. Mount secrets only at runtime and don't persist it in the cluster. Rotating them automatically, and then building the audit, and auditing that access pattern is huge. And then when you shift those sensitive credentials out of Kubernetes entirely, it removes the problem, right? So whether that is, like I mentioned, right, if you're given a cloud access to something, it could be that you just limited that IAM for that thing, or it could be that you mount it with URSA or some other way to get access to the thing you need in the cloud account without actually storing a secret. But certainly if you're going to store that secret, do it in such a way that it is as limited as you can. And I said it a few times, right? But this all kind of boils down to just reducing the blast radius. And if there are two of us in the room, there are two potential compromise vectors, right? That's part of it. And if Joe knows something, and I'm accessible because I trust Joe, right? then you could use Joe to get through me to the thing, right? And that's ultimately what this all comes down to. So exposing those Kubernetes APIs to the server to the public internet. You mentioned this, Joe. It's pretty easy to get a VPC. It's pretty easy to kind of lock the door. If you're a small team, especially, like there are so many tools here that are easy and maybe even free, especially at like trial level, to like just get into that VPC. Like Telscale is an easy one. They're kind of taking the on the VPN like network paradigms. But like even getting like open source VPNs and whatnot is going to be pretty easy. So unauthenticated or overly broad access via the misconfigured RBAC, we talked through that a lot. Legacy insecure ports, don't even allow HTTP. Say, look, I don't allow people in my house that don't go through HTTPS, and then lack of IP whitelisting, right? So take your private clusters, your VPNs, and whitelist your IPs. And then it's going to be a lot harder to get into the thing. And then we kind of just enable APIs excessively, and we don't always audit the extensions there, right? And so it's easy to just try to move fast, right? The tool solves my problem. I'm gonna put it into practice. So how to lock it down is use those private endpoints. So if you got to hit S3, don't allow internet access. Allow access to S3, VPN access or trusted IPs only. Enable strong authentication, so certs and OIDC that enforce RBAC in and of themselves, and then disable secure ports and unnecessary APIs. I mean, this is pretty simple, right? Like again, first principles type stuff there. Protect etcd at all costs, right? TLS encryption. Restricted access, disk level encryption. That is the local vault that you have. And then this one's the hard one, right? Because it takes time sometimes. Now there's lots of tools that help us. There's AI that's trying to make this better, things like that. But monitor logs for brute force attempts. I mentioned one that I caught. Luckily, right, our EDR caught it. I got in there, validated that it was real. Isolated it down, like shut down the vectors and moved on because we knew we had it taken care of. But like without those logs, this would have been impossible to know. And unauthorized API usage is the other thing, right? So not just the system level logs and the node logs and the pod logs, but like what's happening in that API itself, and does anything there look funny? The number of API requests that come in that have just random stuff in it, trying to find an underlying weakness, be it in the, maybe you're running an old PHP server or something, right? And they just know somehow that you're running PHP. And if they do, then you've got, potentially an old server out there, and they're just going to try to find it. And if they can, they'll use that as a leverage point and gain access to other things. So, and I'm not picking on PHP. I haven't touched it in a while, but like, any one of these languages has the same problem. So like, don't worry. It doesn't matter which one you choose. They all have vulnerabilities.
All right. So prevention isn't enough, right? This can't just be a reactive process. We've talked about how fast the threat landscape moves, how creative, novel, motivated the bad guys are here. We've talked about how to minimize vulnerabilities. The next step in this kind of maturity journey for securing Kubernetes is observability and detection. Even in a well-secured Kubernetes environment, misuse, drift, supply chain risk, all those things can still happen, vulnerabilities, right? Let's walk through really quickly how to build visibility into your cluster's behavior and do that before something breaks instead of just fixing it after it's happened. All right, so don't just secure, observe, be proactive, get ahead of this. Securing your APIs, that's one thing, right? But monitoring how they're being used to the point that Cliff just talked about is what turns security from kind of static and reactive to dynamic and preventative. Those first clumsy bangs on the door from a threat actor, right? That's trying to brute force into your environment, that's trying to use automation to throw every possible string of API commands to see if you've got your APIs locked down or not. Those are first clumsy attempts to see, while burning very low calories, if there's a way that they can get into your Kubernetes environment, right? Subsequent steps will probably be much less clumsy, and will probably leverage what they've learned about your environment to redouble their effort in a more precise way. So Kubernetes offers full audit logging. Turn it on, right? Aggregate it. Pull that into an environment where you can understand the API requests, the volume of those requests, where those requests are coming from, and you can compare them against things like lists of trustworthy and untrustworthy IP addresses, right? Or domain blacklists, things that could give you an understanding. Look at them by geo region, right? Why do I have North Korean IPs trying to access my API endpoints? As an example, those things might not be common, or they might raise a bit of a flag for you. With some proper telemetry, you can spot everything from these brute force and kind of clumsy attempts all the way to finite, like priv escalation and configuration drift, indications that they might already be inside the network. In the event of a breach, hopefully it doesn't happen to you, audit logs are going to really become your only source of truth for what really happened, right? It's not in the logs, it didn't happen. It's an old saying, but it's true. That is going to become your breadcrumb trail where you figure out, how did they get here? What was the first step into the network? How did they escalate privileges? How were they able to get their hands on these assets and do that in many cases undetected for some significant period of time? So be proactive. Let's move forward here. Trust. Trust but verify.
Yeah.
Right over to you, Cliff. That that is the attitude that makes this work.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's an old Russian proverb there, and pretty valuable for us. So, the goal of this one is scan those containers. I think if you're taking in a third-party container, scanning, if you're building it, starting with the best base you can, right? Whether it's UBI 9 minimal, maybe if you're using Red Hat or a ChainGuard image, or I think Bitnami just released a secure image repository that they're just starting to build these really hardened images that meet a lot of standards. These are really good things to start with. So the base image is the first piece, but then you got the binary and all of that. Set up automated scanning, right? So if you're pulling something into your environment, again, you're still responsible for it, right? You're owning it once it's in there. And so so scan those things on at least nightly basis. Pull in from the latest tag. This can be silently updated and repulled. This is a risk in and of itself too, right? Because if you know you're partnering with a team that's like pushing out security patches, then they're staying on top of it. This is like in your best benefit. But if you're not, right, it's kind of that trust relationship that you got to measure here, and decide. Like what level of this am I willing to take, or do I want to know that the thing that I have in here is something I've scanned, et cetera, et cetera. Any of those public registries, they can be lower trust. It's another point of failure there, low transparency. And then the software supply chain attack. I mentioned several times in this that the further down in the stack you go, the more dangerous it gets. Software supply chain attacks may not be the most prevalent attack vector. You hear about a lot of other things going on. They tend to be the reason that those most bad ones are, because again, you kind of start to stack these things in the chain together. But by the time you get down through a vulnerability that happened in the supply chain, it is the most dangerous thing that could happen. Whether you go back a few years ago with I can't remember the name of the company, but like it just hit the internet by storm, right? They just go pervasive because everybody's adopted them. Log4j, another example. I've seen GitHub actions that everybody trusted, and then they allowed one bad open source contribution to come in with a command that runs in it that's like going and collecting data or something like that. So it could just be really scary. Scan them with CID/CD, do it automatically. Flag everything that is high severity and above, especially. And if you can stop it before you deploy it, do, and then just go back and mitigate. Enforce signed images only, SIG store and cosign. will help you understand that the image is coming from who said they produced it, who you believe produced it, and validate that provenance using a SLSA framework. Um, Use those trusted base images. I already talked about that a little bit. Apply Kubernetes and mission controls. Again, Kyverno and Gatekeeper here are huge to block any unsigned, unscanned images. And then keep an inventory of everything that's running. The inventory sometimes can be one of those things where you don't necessarily think about investing a ton, but if you keep it, then that's how you have a manifest of what to go fix and how to mitigate. Like we talked about with the ingress nightmares, that kind of thing. And so monitor, detect, respond, right? So take that suspicious activity in real time if you can, right? Those things that are coming in through logs, coming in through API endpoints. Falco is great at doing this automatically. Log what matters and watch for drift. So audit the API calls to monitor the events and track the off hours changes. And then choose tools that add signal and not noise. That is I think the key to trying to build up this whole fortress around you is if there's entirely too much data to make action, it's useless. So find the things that are going to actually pinpoint the areas that are the most risky or the most need of change, and then go enact that change and move on to the next thing and start working through that list. So if you take those three principles, I think you're gonna be better off for it. And then harden continuously. CI/CD is your friend. Building regular practices here is your friend. You can benchmark these against these known standards, right? Whether it's CIS, NSA, CISA. These hardening guides are huge. There's automation for this continuous validation, like Kubescape, our CSPM platform. So you regularly scan for those misconfigurations or any policy drift. And then we've talked about it several times here. Turn policies into guardrails. Turn them into a lane of freedom in between them, right? That's the way ideally you can create that partnership in your team with each other to say, we know that these guardrails exist, but the lane in between is freedom, and we're going to run as fast as we can inside of that lane. And if you do those things, hopefully you'll start to be a little more protected on those bad days.
Yeah, and this is a marathon, right? I know we speak in sprints, we live in sprints, right? But this is a marathon. This is doing the right thing continuously, consistently over the entire life of your team, your organization, your applications, the software, as long as it runs. So some takeaways here, right? Least privilege should be your love language. You should be enforcing that as both a theory across everything, but also tactically across things like setting up good RBAC roles, authorization, access, and then audit those things regularly. Harden workloads right at the pod level, right? Apply security context, PSA, policy as code, anything and everything that helps you remove elements of human mistake, the potential for vulnerability, inconsistency, things like that. And ultimately segment your network according to best practices, right? Use network policies to block the ability of attackers to easily move around inside of your environment to find the things that you are most concerned about protecting. Secure the things that are the most important, right? Externalize your secrets. If you can't, harden the heck out of them. Minimize API exposure. Those things don't need to be flapping in the wind on the internet. In many cases, a sharp whitelist is much better than a lengthy blacklist. Monitor access, see who is accessing those endpoints, look for strange behavior, look for things happening when they shouldn't, or requests coming from places that they shouldn't. Those can tip you off to something more sinister. And then detect, log, and respond, right? This is about being traffic cop. Use runtime detection, use audit logs, document as much as you possibly can, but don't drown yourself in data. These will become very useful, if and when something happens, but they can also be used proactively, like a canary in a coal mine, to indicate that you're at the front end of a potential incident.
Great. Thanks, Joe and Cliff. We also wanted to share some key resources for you all today. If you look on your console there, you will be able to download a PDF version of this deck with all the links included. So we include some documentation and Kubernetes guides that we have, as well as some documentation just generally on Kubernetes security, the CIS benchmarks, and links to various tools that we talked about. So feel free to check those out. And now we'll move on to Q&A. We did get a couple of pre-submitted questions, so we'll start with a couple of those. But if you have any questions, feel free to also drop those into your chat, and we'll cover as many as we can in the few minutes we have left. So the first question we had was about Kubernetes cluster migration. And someone wanted to know if they can integrate Kubecost with other tools to support pod migration.
Yeah, I think I'll take a stab at this one first. There's a couple of ways that you might interpret this question, or at least I did. One, can we ensure that when we migrate pods, that they're in a cluster that's already being managed by Kubecost, so that you get the visibility of what kind of cost impact, hopefully savings, you get from migrating those pods? And yes, there are ways that you can, first identify and then ensure that Kubecost is instrumented on all of the clusters in your environment. And there's some nice capabilities inside of Kubecost that can help you understand things that are reporting cost, but maybe don't have a Kubecost agent on them. The other way to think about this is maybe that you want to be able to have Kubecost automatically instrumented on a new cluster where you've maybe migrated a pod to. I encourage you to reach out through our Slack channel that we will include in the recap of this. You can also get to it on our website. We'd love to have a conversation, see if the current capabilities of Kubecost align with your needs, or if there's something else that you might be looking for here.
That's great. The next question we had was about AI and automation. Someone wanted to know what capabilities are coming up.
Yeah, take a stab here, Joe. Oh yeah, go ahead, Joe.
No. Oh, all you.
Yeah. So I think across Kubecost, Apptio, Cloudability, all of IBM, actually, AI is obviously ever present in all of our strategy. When we look to do this, I think there's two pieces here. One is how we help you manage your AI cost and spend, whether that's you're building data models or how you're, even in some of the Apptio stuff, how you're spending across LLMs and things like this. And the automation that we kind of bring here, I think when you look at our kind of roadmap that's coming up soon, we've got even more investments in overall automation that I think will drive our ability to kind of build the tools around here to help you use Kubecost with your AI agents, and we're looking at what kind of agents we need to just present natively as well, and things like that. But yeah, I think this is definitely a lot going on here, and I look for more of this to be built on as we look into to the end of 2025, 2026. Start looking at that roadmap from Kubecost to see more direction there.
Absolutely. Yeah, AI and automation are really kind of our target areas. Looks like we're about out of time. Dee, back to you.
Yeah, thanks for joining, everyone. And thank you to both Joe and Cliff for walking us through all this today. I know we covered quite a lot. So if you have any other questions, you're more than welcome to reach out to us directly. I did include a link to our Slack channel there on your console. So feel free to join there, and you can get in contact with anyone on our team directly. But if you want to email us, you can also do that. And our email is team-kubecost@ibm.com. And with that, we'll end it there. Thank you for joining today. Have a good rest of your day.